Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our introductory webinar on changing the conversation on grief.
I'm Dan Leffler, and together we co-founded Being with Grief 11 years ago.
Not quite.
To deal with a topic that had occurred in our lives that we'll tell you more about. But first, we'd like to go over some of the housekeeping issues that follow all of these Zoom calls.
First of all, we would ask that you keep yourself on mute so that you can hear us clearly and there's no interference. We also honor your wish to keep yourself off video if you so choose. This is a safe place where there is clear boundaries.
And we would like to stress that total honesty. We will put our hearts on our sleeves for you. And we ask that you tell, if you choose to tell your story, that you talk from your personal point of view so that we can establish a rapport.
And we will honor your individuality and uniqueness. Each person's journey is different, and there's no comparison versus my loss or your loss or anyone else's loss.
Exactly. It's also important to establish what is grief, and grief is normal and natural. There's nothing wrong with us, except that our hearts have been broken. And it is about that the subject of grief becomes near and dear to us. It's normal and natural, and it happens anytime there's a change in the pattern of behavior, something that had become a familiar pattern of behavior.
Yeah, so it happens not only when we lose a loved one, but also when a life change in a big way, when there's an experience of transformation, like a job loss, or when our health changes, or the ways our lives have changed.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're on housekeeping.
We are.
And we'd also like that if you have anything specific, you can put it in the chat, or you can direct message us in chat if you choose to be anonymous. That way we can make sure that we're covering everything that you need to hear about. And Nancy will tell us later about how this conversation can continue.
So all that being said, today we're going to share a little bit about our story and about some of the topics that we'll be going deeper into. If you saw any of our Facebook lives, you may have seen snippets of that, and we'll go a little deeper today and talk about how that will continue.
Because the first question that we wanted to talk about is how we got here, why we believe that we are authorized to talk about this.
Right.
And it's because of the loss of our daughter 21 years ago.
Right. And yeah, our daughter Leah was 17. She was a senior in high school at the time. She was on her way to school and she hit a tree.
We don't know why that happened. We don't know what the circumstances is. And it is one of those questions that may be going through your mind, like a squirrel in a squirrel cage or a hamster in a hamster wheel.
Yeah, that why thing, that can be one of the things that keep us stuck in grief. But we're going to talk about how we were able to climb out of that deep well of despair. And Leah was in the hospital for 5 days before we had to make the decision that no person no parent should ever have to make. We had to decide to remove her from life support. And when I left the hospital that day, I really didn't know how I was going to get to the next moment, let alone to the next day, let alone to where we are today.
And for my part, as a man, I wasn't used to expressing my emotions and dealing with the intense feeling of overwhelm that happened when we were faced with this horrible situation. I did what I expect many do and have done. I took all of those feelings and compartmentalized them, put them in a locked box that I could stuff everything into, turn the key, and then put it on the shelf for me to deal with at a later time, if I was ever going to deal with it. But there came a time not long after that I realized that that wasn't going to work. When those feelings became so strong that it affected my life, my health, my relationship with Nancy, my relationship with work and my career, I knew I had to do something. And it's similar to, it's totally different because we each had to deal with life in our own way and with this grief.
Yeah, it's similar in that we each knew that we had to do something to get through the grief. For myself, shortly after Leah died, when I was wanting to completely isolate myself because grief can be very isolating, and I wanted to stay in bed. I didn't want to take a shower. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just thought that if I ate enough chocolate chip cookies, I wouldn't have to feel the pain of losing Leah. But I received a message that I really consider a life-saving message, and that was that losing Leah is too high a price to pay to not live the life that I was meant to live. And that sent me on a path to discover what that life was. I had already been a speaker at the time. I had done a lot of inner work, but I felt like this was giving me an opportunity to go deeper. And did I want to do it at the time? No, I didn't want to do it at the time. We don't like to feel uncomfortable feelings, but we both realized that that was what was being asked of us if we were going to honor our daughter, because it would have been easy to stay in a place, to stay stuck in a place that didn't honor her, that didn't give us the opportunity to live a full life. It would have been much easier. So I began to, I turned to a practice that was already part of my life at the time, the present moment awareness practice called Samyama. And that helped me to be with the pain of losing Leah, one feeling at a time rather than the onslaught of overwhelming intense feelings that we both felt, and I'm sure you have felt as well. It helped me to be with them one at a time in my heart. And when I saw how powerful this practice was in helping me to move through my grief, to be with our uncomfortable feelings, I became certified as a Samyama practitioner, and that's the foundation of the work that I do with my clients. In addition, I was called to write a book about my experience, something I didn't want to do. I resisted writing it until it was easier to just write it. And so I was being, as I followed these breadcrumbs, these steps, I was called deeper and deeper into the life that I was meant to live. And today I feel like I am living that life by continuing to say yes to where life is calling me, including starting this webinar with Dan.
One thing I'd also like to add in is if you hear any extraneous noise, it's because we have some construction going on upstairs from us that was totally unexpected. And after we had set this date, this morning we hear a bunch of racket sound. For my part, as I mentioned, I compartmentalized. When I realized that that wasn't going to work for me, I began searching for alternative ways to begin my healing process. I looked to Nancy and saw the progress that she was making in doing her work. And when I say her work, men and women grieve differently. It's a recognized scientific fact. For me, I started a conversation with a therapist. And that got me quickly to a point where I realized that this work was important. And we began talking about forming Being with Grief. But it really wasn't until I came across what I'm certified in, which is the grief recovery method, that I began my true healing practice. There'll be more about that in future videos, but it's appealed to me from an engineering standpoint in my background, and it kind of deconstructed what grief meant for me. And it is something that I offer to my clients, working one-on-one or within groups. And again, the importance of where we're headed here is the cost of grief to ourselves if we don't deal with the feelings.
Well, here's something to put that in perspective. And this is the Grief Recovery Institute, the certification institute that you studied with, has a startling statistic. And this talks about the cost of grief to the workplace. And it exceeds $116 billion a year. That's billion with a B. And they looked at three basic areas: poor decision making, inability to concentrate, and safety. Now, if you look at that as a cost to the business world, how do those things affect you personally? I know my inability to concentrate was a huge factor, not only at work, but in our relationship, in our family. We couldn't be the parents that we wanted to be for our son, who was also grieving the loss of his sister. So when you look at the cost of not meeting your grief, it's all of those things that I just talked about for corporate, and that comes back to you personally.
Yes, for me, I realized that that we are not pressure cookers. We are not meant to hold grief inside, because not only does it affect our health by holding that pressure, it affects our mental capacity and has an impact on our total approach to life.
So, having touched briefly on some of the costs of grief, why do you think we're so reluctant to talk about it?
Fear of the things that are uncomfortable.
Fear of the unknown.
Yeah. And for myself, and you may find it in a similar manner, I learned how to grieve based on what I observed from my parents and from the other grievers that came into my early life.
Right.
And it's important to understand that grief happens throughout our lives. From the small grief all the way through to something as traumatizing to us as the loss of our daughter.
Right. And when we develop the capacity to be able to meet those smaller griefs, we also then have the resources in place when a larger grief occurs. That's one of our founding tenets. That's one of the things we both discovered as we were going through our own grief journey. Now, we each went through our own grief journeys individually, as we told you, and your grief journey is individual and unique to you. One of the things we help our clients do is to give them permission to grieve in their own way. So we needed to each do our own grief journey our way up until the point where we could come together and begin to help each other heal, and then form this company and be able to help others, and now working together. Our company's been together 8 or 9 years. This is really the first time that we've worked together in the capacity of being with grief. So it's been a real evolution for us, and we're really, really excited to be able to pool our collaborative wisdom, so to speak, and share these resources and conversations with you.
Because where does all the healing, or where can all the healing begin? Is through conversation and being open.
And through connection.
True. When we isolate in our grief, we're cutting ourselves off from one of the first and basic ways that healing can begin.
Yeah. And one of the important reasons that feeling is so key to the healing process is that we tend to think of feelings as good or bad, positive and negative. And so these huge feelings of grief come in and we think there's this big negative cloud sitting over us. Well, what we've learned is that feelings are neither good nor bad. They're maybe comfortable and uncomfortable, painful and joyful, but all feelings want to be met as they are. And when they are, they dissipate. They get quieter when we meet them, just like a cloud dissipates when it rains.
And I like to, using myself as an example, when I first started this work, which included inner work and work specifically on grief, I realized that I had 5 basic emotions. It's what I call the men's cycle of grief, or our starting point. We are joyful, or we're sad, glad, mad, shamed, and fearful. And with Leah's loss, I experienced all of those at once. And being in touch with the feelings, allowing those things to find its way into how my values match, accelerated my healing process, and that gift, that part of me is, and I didn't speaking for you, but is again why we're here doing this work.
Yeah, and you're speaking to the transformation that's possible when we meet our grief, which is one of our topics for a future webinar. And that transformation for me allows me to be able to talk about my story. I didn't want to write my book. I didn't want to put my story in black and white so that someone could read it and then have to talk about it. And yet that's where I get some of the most meaningful part of my life is sharing my story, is walking with others on the grief journey, because I've witnessed, and I know you witnessed, what's possible when we have the courage of heart to say yes to our journey.
And let's talk about that. We're at a point now, we want to be respectful of everyone's time, but what our plan is for the next segment of this. Nancy, do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, we will be beginning the webinar series in March. They will be every second Tuesday of the month at this time, 11 a.m. Central Time. And we will be choosing a topic or two, usually related topics, to talk about. our presentation, our conversation, let's not call it a presentation,
Yeah.
because we really like this conversation format.
And we hope that we can get your participation here as well as we develop this community, as we make connections, and as we open ourselves up to this process.
So our conversation will be anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. And then we will take questions from you. And we will begin that, as I said, in March. We are offering a special pricing for the first 3 months, and that special pricing is a one-time payment of $45. That special is good from today through the end of February. And then after that, membership will be $200 every 6 months. And what will you receive for this investment? You will receive these live monthly videos. You will be a part of our Facebook community. It's a private group. No one can find it unless they are a member, so no one can comment on your posts without them being a member, without them being a part of our paid community.
And we'll be the admins for that.
Yes, we will. You'll be able to ask questions. We'll be putting content in there if you join today. Since there isn't another live webinar until March, we'll be interacting with you in there. So you will be finding value for your investment right away.
Right. And let me ask, what topics will we be exploring?
Well, we have a wide variety of topics. The first 3 months are already set. We'll be talking about how do we get unstuck from grief. You know, we both touched a little bit about how what that looks like for each of us. We will go deeper into how you can get unstuck and offer you some resources for that.
And things like milestones, and how to get over those bumps or triggers that can take you, from where you think you're on the upward climb to back down in the pit.
And what are associative memories? That's a memory that may hit you, that may seem to hit you out of the blue and you have no idea why. So we'll talk about what those are. I'll also talk about how to grieve in your own way. What makes sense to you? You do not have to grieve the way that anybody else tells you you should. There's nothing to get over. When people ask you, aren't you over that yet? We'll give you some answers to that question. And we'll give you permission to do it in your own way.
The last part of this first 3-month special will be about transformation due to what you learn along the way in your grief journey. How that transformation is possible, and what you can look toward as a reason to be part of this community.
Yeah, it's transformation gives you, helps you find meaning and purpose and joy again in your life. And for me, I found all of those things. But in addition, it also helped me to heal some old childhood wounds that I've been working on for a really long time. And I was able to get to the root of a lot of those wounds and continue to know how to meet them when I'm triggered in that way.
And like I said, grief occurs from your beginning at the moment of, you're aware of consciousness, all the way up to, the present moment, because that's what we have right now. And that healing that you spoke about in your childhood is something that we all have and carry with us. And, one of my earliest ones was the Little League game that I lost. But more on that, coming up a little teaser.
So some of the other topics we'll be talking about as we go forward after the first 3 months in no particular order, is how to open up channels of awkward conversation with your family or friends, how to be vulnerable. What about the styles of the world? We haven't talked about the changes that COVID has brought into our lives, but that they've been huge. And I hear everybody talking about getting back to a new collective normal. And personally, I don't think that's going to happen. We need to create our new normal that makes sense to us.
Right.
What are some of the myths of grief? That's one of your favorite topics.
Sure, and that's a grief recovery method chapter in and of itself. Things like being strong, or grieve alone, or time heals all wounds are some of the things that we'll talk about on that month. Another thing that we'll be doing is inviting guest interviewees to come on the show with us and to tell about their experiences and how they've met grief, or what they offer in terms of help to folks who are experiencing things, and maybe touch on some of
Yes,
those.
these are some of the people that we've met along the way that we want you to know, like estate attorneys who can help you talk about what happened to that part of it. That was something that I knew nothing about. It's been very helpful to talk with some of them. Officiants, excuse me. What is a death doula? How can a death doula support you before and after? What is ambiguous grief or anticipatory grief?
And while Nancy recovers, let me say funerals and what to expect for a visit with a funeral director. We'll talk about aging in place, something that we've had to look at and consider as we've simplified our life and moved to become closer to our family, our son and his family. And, it's, again, something that as we, another topic of grief is retirement, what happens there. But again, that's a topic for another time.
Yeah, and just a brief comment on that before I tell you how you can join us. There's grief that occurs even when we do take actions that we want to take, like retirement, like moving to a new place. If we don't grieve what went before, we will carry some of that with us. So how can you continue this journey with us? I will put the link to find out more information and to register for the $45 special in the comments. And this will include, as I said, these live videos, as well as a membership portal where the videos will be available as long as you will remember. You'll also be invited into our private Facebook group.
One of the other things that we'll do is we'll send you this information in an email that will be going out soon to summarize some of this information, because we understand that it's a lot to take in. And and again, when you're grieving, it can be overwhelming and too much to deal with. So we'll bullet point.
You'll receive all the information on how to continue with us, as well as this video, and how to reach out to us if you would like to have a personal one-on-one conversation with either of us. We are open to all of your questions, and we're really excited about this new aspect of our journey.
Just from a standpoint, we're getting questions posted here, and one of the questions that came in was, what is the most frequent question that we're asked about grief? We have a thing, one of the things that, you've already talked about, what was
One of the things that I get asked about is
it?
self-care.
Yes.
How can I take care of myself when I don't feel like it? And that's my question, because we hear a lot about self-care anyway, and when we're breathing, our self-care needs may change. So it's about looking at what we need right now. It's about maybe making sure that we get enough rest, or that we are moving, or that we're eating enough nourishing food. Because when we're doing all of those things, we develop a greater capacity to be able to feel those difficult feelings.
The thing I was trying to think of was when you were speaking about COVID and how the world has changed. That's I think we've talked about enough, but one of the things that I like to focus on is men's grief. I know that the trouble that I faced, many men also face. And I understand, coming from the construction industry, that the natural tendency is to bury and compartmentalize and ignore, and it comes out in behaviors that do not serve us. Eating too much, drinking too much, turning to other diversions that keep us from feeling those feelings and moving toward practices that will help our healing. It's an important topic to me, and I want to dig into that a little bit more. What else? Having those awkward conversations. How do you start those? For us, our son opened the door.
Yeah, he did.
And one Thanksgiving, he said, "Have you guys ever considered a will?" Boy, that was awkward. But we looked at one another and we said, "No." and
that introduced us to our estate attorney, and got us thinking about that, and the importance of having those conversations. And that is a question that I get asked a lot. How do I start?
Yes.
And what's next?
Exactly. And here it is. This is your opportunity. There's nothing in the way. There's no more excuses. We open the conversation. We invite your conversation. We want this to be a success, and we look forward to a time when we can have this conversation with you. So with that, what else do we have?
Thank you very much for being here today. We are honored that you took the time to watch our video, and we look forward to continuing the conversation each month and in our Facebook group.
This is Dan and Nancy Leffler with Being with Grief. Thank you very much.